a directness towards his audience. Apparently when he started his first speaking in Baghdad, where he had a futuhat, an opening from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to speak, he just began to speak in the masjid. And when people weren't present, he would speak to the walls. And as people listened to him, they gathered around him. And they gathered around him until the masjid became too small. And then there was no place in the city of Baghdad that could hold the numbers of people, so they had to go outside the city walls in order to meet the demand of being able to hear his speeches. But you see from his beginning, he wasn't necessarily interested in necessarily speaking to people as a professional wa'iz. He spoke because Allah opened up to him to speak. And that, in a sense, is something which is reflective of prophetic religion. Rasulullah, who was the grandfather of Syedena Abdul Qadir Quddusuhu, he spoke through wahi, but his grandson, Syedena Abdul Qadir Quddusuhu, spoke through ilham. So ilham is a child, a walad, of wahi in a sense, for they both come from Allah. But one has one is distinct, obviously. All of us, when we look at his writings, his speeches, we see that, as I mentioned, this urgency for transformation. And we all must be realistic about this. We speak of him as the great wali of Allah, but we often forget to speak of him as the great jurist as he was, and the scholar of Aqidah that he was, etc. He wasn't merely a man who we typify as one of the awliyaullah, but he was of the awliyaullah of the highest ranks, in a sense he was also of the ulama. Or when an alim is a wali, then you have truly a warith of Rasulullah, you have an inheritor of the Prophet amongst you. Wilayat, sainthood, can be given to the most ignorant of people. Being near to Allah is an act of personal endeavor, where you have your own personal juhud in ibadat, and then Allah has His own jazba, which He pulls you. But not everyone takes a path of scholarship and then combines in that scholarship sincerity, ikhlas, which then causes that person to excel. Many ulama, unfortunately, we see them as ulama, but unfortunately they will also be people of hellfire, and they will have the worst of punishments. For one's knowledge is only salvific or saving if it's acted upon. And the Rasul has made that quite clear in numerous hadith. We may ask Allah to give us the ability to be true to the knowledge that we know. But sometimes, as my wife says, it's sometimes best not to know things, because when you know, then you're accountable. Your accountability for Allah is much more pronounced and much more certain, in the sense that it's much more like a sharpened knife's blade. It cuts more. It is impressive that here in the United States, here in Houston, here in this north suburb of Houston, we have young people who are working on their hifz and who are in this tradition of the poetry and the praise, the med of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this is a very important tradition. There's no question about the hifz program that has to be constantly done. Every community must have the memorization of the Quran within it. Otherwise, this community is a bankrupt community. At the same time, though, when we praise and we acknowledge through poetry and through recitation, the nasheeds, as we find our, can I say, something which brings us closer, we feel, to Rasulullah in our gatherings such as this. But it would be bereft of me not to remind you that at the same time, and I've said last time I spoke at one of the gatherings, is that you must be very mindful also that you need to strive to establish institutes of knowledge beyond just Quran recitation. And we need to make sure that we establish madrasas that teach Arabic language. The hufaz here who gather must also know Arabic. They can't just be hufaz of thousands of Arabic huruf. They have to be knowledgeable of the language, of its morphology, its sarf, its syntax, its nahu, its rhetoric, its balagha, which are foundational for the survival of this religion. At the same time, we have to have knowledge of usul al-din, principles of foundations of faith, and usul fiqh, the principles of fiqh, along with fiqh itself, so that we can speak to it properly. We must make sure that, just as it happened in the subcontinent, that Muslims immigrated and moved into the subcontinent centuries ago, and a unique, distinct Islamic culture developed in the subcontinent, and you are the grandchildren of that. Just as it developed in Bosnia, just as it developed in sub-Saharan Africa, and such as it developed in the Malayan archipelago, in Indonesia and Malaysia, and just as it developed in China, it too must develop here in North America. And we must not be lax or content in the means of expression that we express ourselves. We must grab the bull by the horn literally, and we must make this effort in our community to establish complete scholarship. So just as the subcontinent became independent in a sense from its need towards Baghdad or Damascus, where its own scholarship was sustainable, Houston and Los Angeles and Alberta and Toronto and Miami, these North American cities must also become independent in their own way. And we must be these people who are you are the first generation, the first wave of immigrants, and I being one of the first group of converts in North America, that we take this very seriously. This is where, not only by having the physical presence of a saintly person physically located here, in Rashahat Ain al-Hayat, which is one of the classical Naqshbandi compendiums of biographical works of Naqshbandi Mashaykh, there's a story of one of the Mashaykh. He was he saw one of his murids reciting a book. So he asked him, well, what are you reading? And he said to him, I'm reading the Methnawi of Syedena Rumi, which is a Suru. He said, it's a marvelous book. And the Sheikh said, put the book down and go to the corner and do your own wird, do your dhikr. If you continue with that, you will write your own Methnawi. I'm going to Turkey on the 18th of June, and one of the things I'll be doing in Turkey, other than teaching some Ghazali works, I'm going to be reading from the Ruh al-Methnawi. Ruh al-Methnawi is an Ottoman Turkish commentary. It was finished in 1703 by Ismail Haq al-Bursawi. Ismail Haq al-Bursawi was very well known for his Ruh al-Bayan, a very well-known commentary to the Quran. But he wrote many works, really works on the thought of Ibn Arabi for the Surah. He has this brilliant, amazingly in-depth commentary to the Methnawi of Rumi. So I'm going to be just giving a few lessons. The beginning of the Methnawi, Bishnu, listen, and this Shnu, and to listen in Farsi, and then he has this Ba, the Ba harf. He gives about a good 12 to 15 pages, I remember, just on commentary to the Ba. The Ba, as it begins. Why does the Ba begin the Methnawi? Why does the Ba begin Bismillah in the Quran, for example? The significance of the Ba and the Nuqta, the dot, under the Ba. The importance of the symbolism there. That capacity of a person to have that capacity to reflect on such almost seemingly insignificant things is something of the wealth of the khazina, of the treasury, which people who are obedient in knowledge, in aqidah, and in personal devotion, in public display with sincerity and humility, and in khidmah to people, to the community, these people are, as the Sheikh said in the Rashahat, if you do your wird, you yourself can write your own Methnawi. You must not belittle yourself and think that you do not have capacity to be a great one from the great ones of the ulama. Every soul, every person who is Muhammadi Mashra, every person who is within the framework of the Muhammadan revelation, ﷺ, has that inherent capacity. But it's because, as Sayyidina Abdul Qadir, you'll see so much in his works, We love the